Hey, what's good, Colorado? I hope that you are doing well here on this snowy Thursday. We've been blessed with some weather finally, and it is white outside, and finally what we deserve. But it is February as well. So I appreciate you joining me here today. And today's show, I'm going to talk about the other side of the coin from what I usually talk about. So most of my segments so far are really focused in on positive stories about what's going on in our community, highlighting people that are have these they're involved in the community and they are helping others. But what we really haven't talked about is kind of that flip side of the coin, because with that positivity and that good work, it's being done because there are people who have pain in their life, and maybe they have grief in their life, and we haven't gone really into that in this show yet. But today's show is opportunity to do that, but again, do it in a positive way and highlight somebody who I think is an inspiration in our community. Joining me today is Maria Hopfgarten, who is the author of a book that came out last fall, Letters to Jacob, the story of parents grieving the loss of a child. And I've seen a lot of friends online and talked with friends who, over the last several months or the last year, have been struggling in their own life through the loss of parents, through the loss of other loved ones. It could be a completely different story. Maybe it's depression or overwhelming stress that comes with the world that we live in now, maybe with COVID. It could be any number of things. You know, we all go through it at some level. We have seasons in our life. Maybe some seasons are longer than others, where we struggle through that pain, through that grief and that loss. And I think it's just part of our experience. So what do we do when we experience that? I don't necessarily have the answer for that today, but what I want to do is talk through an incredible example of somebody who I met several years ago, and who has a very compelling story that I think is worth sharing. Maria and her family, and the loss of their son a few years ago, their son Jacob. So I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. Love talking with Maria. It's been a long time since her and I have connected, and I'm just grateful that she has decided to join me today and has opened up and done so by writing a book and sharing her experience. So let's dive in, and please help me welcome Maria Hopfgarten to Mile High Live. Hey Maria, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are
I'm
you?
doing good, thank you. So I appreciate you coming on and hanging out with me here for a little bit. And like you said, for you've opened up about your life. You've written a book. You were writing a blog before that we can dive into. Kind of, set the foundation stones for writing your book. But it'll love for you to, as we talk through your experience, for your family, with Jacob, what you guys experienced with him, his condition, and then just talking through what you guys went through. I guess it was in 2016 when Jacob passed, and he's 10 years old. And I just remember when we met a couple of years before that, talking with you and hearing your story, and you have such a positive attitude and approach, even though I know you're going through difficult circumstances, and since we had met, the loss of your son, which there's nothing harder than the loss of a child. We all expect to lose a parent, but not a child. So appreciate you coming on and joining us. Yeah.
Great.
So, yeah,
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start. So
Yeah, if you could share just,
you,
just share a little bit about
yeah,
yourself and who you are,
yeah,
and
yes.
then, from that, just tell us a little bit about Jacob and who he
Yeah.
was.
So I'm Maria, and I, I don't know how to say this, but I fell into the special needs community
Mm,
through my son Jacob, and
it's a great way to put it.
what a great community
Mm,
to fall into. And I did that because my second child basically was born with mitochondrial disease. So it's a genetic metabolic disease, and didn't show any symptoms from the day he was born, but it didn't
okay.
take too long. I think it was about 3 weeks, and was diagnosed with failure to thrive. So he
Mm,
basically could not eat. And I remember that I think he got a diagnosis of lactose intolerant. And
mhm.
I thought, okay, we can deal with that and now move on with our lives and enjoy our baby. And little did I know that he was very, very medically
Mm.
complex. And if we were not home, we were at Children's Hospital. So he heavily, heavily relied on, hospital care and, I mean, specialist care throughout his life.
I think what you started out with here is interesting, and something that I've learned over time is a first diagnosis may not even be right, and
No.
that's hard to go through because you think, we've solved it, we got it, now we know what the problem is, we can apply the fix, and then you come back later and say, wait a second, there's more.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had that actually many times. I
sure.
actually don't think Jacob got a firm diagnosis until he was 6 or 7.
Oh,
He was treated for years as he had a mitochondrial disease, but he had a couple of diagnoses before it was actually determined that, this is a mitochondrial disease. And just to describe Jacob a little bit,
yeah,
like
please.
he was nonverbal his whole life, so he never uttered a word. He could not sit up on his own, so he needed support even when he was sitting in a wheelchair. But he had this. I don't know what to say. One of his nurses said, "You got a case of Jacobs." So he got sort of under your skin because he just lit up the room somehow, and
Right.
it's amazing even today thinking about some of his nurses and therapists. They're still in our lives because they just can't leave us, and I think it is because of the impact he had on their lives. And so, amazing little boy. He learned actually how to communicate with a computer.
Really?
And so, yeah, actually, with first his foot and then later his head, he
Okay.
was able to make choices on a computer. And it was kind of interesting to get to know him as he started to talk because he was not always the most friendly person. I mean, he would ask his sister if, did you just fart? and, and or tell me, Mom, stop talking. And so he
Precocious.
definitely, yeah, he definitely made sure that, no small talk. Let's get to the point of it.
So how
And
did he do that then? So was he able to type then, or
so what it is it's pre-programmed,
uh
so it
huh?
is a little bit limited, but it's amazing. You can even spell out words with
Okay.
with a speech device today. So a little bit
Mm.
limited in that way that we decided his choices in a way. So it wasn't as you and I having a conversation today, but it was amazing, the amount of options that he had.
Yeah.
And we worked with a speech therapist that constantly was adding things for him. So, as maybe he was in school, then we added things specifically for that,
Okay.
and different environments. So not exactly like a word per word communication, but it definitely made a huge difference for him
Yeah.
and for us that we could communicate.
Okay. Okay, so I want to back up here for a second.
Yes.
Talking about mitochondrial disease, can you share about that and how common or rare is it? Because that is something outside of you, I've never heard of this.
So the interesting thing is it is actually quite common. It is actually as common as childhood cancer, but it is very hard to diagnose.
Hmm.
So that might be why people don't hear about it as much as, leukemia or other things, because a lot of children might not get a diagnosis ever. Actually, it's getting easier and easier to diagnose with technology, but it is not as easy. But it is actually quite common, and but it is definitely not always known. So it also
Sure.
depends, where do you live and do you have a mitochondrial specialist? And we're lucky here in Colorado, we even have a mitochondrial clinic.
Mm.
um, I had never heard of it
Yeah.
before
I mean,
my son was diagnosed. And then the mitochondria is in your cells, and it is basically the powerhouse of your body. So it is the mitochondria that basically creates your energy. So one thing, that when your mitochondria isn't working, what are the parts of your body that needs the most energy? Well, it's usually your major organs.
hmm.
So it impacts typically your brain, your lungs, your kidneys, your heart. So, unfortunately, it's also hard to diagnose sometimes because the symptoms are not always the same. Two patients can look quite different. And there are many, many mitochondrial diseases. It's not just like one disease, it's multiple within that family.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Okay.
that's a little bit of
So,
the background
and
of
it
the.
varies in severity as well between
Yes.
people. Okay. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is really ingrained in his cells, in every cell in his body. Is what you're saying. So
Yes.
yeah. So
And you can also have an adult onset. So that's what is a little scary. So, a lot of children, they will, either, have it from birth, right? And like Jacob showed symptoms around 3 weeks. Some will, you will see it right away, or it will develop over the years. But you can also have an adult onset, which is kind of scary.
yeah.
And we were thinking about that in our family. Would I suddenly be sick one day, or our daughter? But through testing, genetic testing, we actually know that, she's not even a carrier. And it's coming from both me and my husband. So it wouldn't be something that I would develop either. But before we knew that, I remember I was also a little bit worried about that.
Okay. And so you mentioned you have a husband, you've got an older daughter. Hey, you know
Yes.
what? Construction happens. We're gonna live with it. So
I had to
somebody's
turn it
doing
off.
some improvement outside. And you're good.
I had to turn it off. Sorry
No,
about this.
you are totally fine. That
I
is
tried
fine.
to do it discreetly, but I don't think I succeeded.
Well, I'm in my basement. The ceiling above me is the kind of a walkway upstairs, and it's hardwood floor, so it's boom, 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 boom. So if you hear that, we'll just play along. So it's totally fine, no worries. So okay, so I mean, you've got beyond your son Jacob, you had a daughter, uh, and how old is she now?
She's
She's
19,
19. Okay.
actually.
Wow.
She's
Okay.
in college,
Oh, good.
and yeah, she is studying to become a PA, which I'm sure
Physician's
her
assistant.
brother, yeah, physician assistant. So I'm sure her brother influenced that decision,
I'm sure.
because I mean she grew up in the hospital partly. So yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Maybe one of the positives, even if of course it's a tremendous loss to lose your brother, and
Yeah.
she was not, I mean, she was it was 2 months before she went into high school, so it was
Mm,
definitely a little bit of a sensitive age as well,
yeah.
and when he passed away.
So I guess one thing that I would was thinking about asking or trying to approach with you is, when you found out he had this condition, or how would you describe it? I guess his condition, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but it sounds like it was a, a process, and it wasn't like a point of demarcation where the doctor comes in and says, "Hey, we need to talk." But you had, I guess, what I wanted to ask about with your daughter and your husband, a family, a marriage, and a family before this, and you know, I guess I'm curious, kind of the process that your family went
Oh
through
my.
with this, what you went through, to I guess, acknowledge the reality of what was confronting you then, and it took time. But this isn't something that nobody grows up and says, "Hey, I want to have a family like this." Right? When you're when
Mhm.
you're when you're dating and courting and you get married and you start talking about having a family, like that none of that is in the cards. So, which is, I think, something that I try to tell people, like, as with children, having a pregnancy is such an exciting moment, but we still are humans, and we still live in a broken world, and diseases happen. You anticipate everything's going to happen perfectly, but it doesn't always turn out that way. But to my point, I guess you guys went through this process, and I'm wondering if you can share about that, because you had a
Of course.
more normal life, a family that
Yes.
you're right. So, can you share about
Yeah.
that?
Oh
Yeah.
yes, of
Yeah.
course. And yeah, and it was really a process,
Yeah.
I would say, and a journey, because in the beginning we we were still hoping that this was not going to be something serious,
Sure.
maybe something that Jacob would grow out of. And so I think we were partly a little bit in denial,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
it is a progressive disease, so it does get progressively worse. So there were many struggles. I mean, in a way, it impacted all parts of our lives.
Sure.
So, for example, I had a very busy career, and I could not continue in the role of
Okay.
being, a manager or director at the time. I actually still continued working in a part-time position with the same company, but there is no way that I could be still working and then having doctor's appointments. And many times we
Yeah.
even just called 911 in the morning because he was having a seizure, for example.
Okay.
Friends
Yeah.
had to change,
Yeah.
like some friends disappeared,
Sure.
and some got very close with us. And marriage life became different. We couldn't just go on a weekend away. Like we were happy if we could maybe go for a date night. So we changed a lot, and then actively we had to make a plan for our daughter. So we really had to intentionally say, one is in the hospital if Jacob is there, the other one is home. So we
Okay.
separated ourselves, I mean, for 10 years when he was in the hospital, because we didn't want her to not have a parent home at night. And so, but
Yeah.
that was, we had to make an effort to always, in a way, put ourselves, a step behind both kids. And that is long for 10 years actually. And also, how do you maybe go and spend this Saturday with your daughter, but you know your other child is in the ICU.
Right.
But we did
You're
that
physically
intention.
with one child, but your mind
Yes,
is and emotions are
yes.
with the other.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I'm happy we did it that way
Yeah.
because I think that really helped Sarah. But yeah, it was definitely times when we were not always succeeding, or where we were definitely also not a perfectly functioning family. And we're both from Sweden, and we didn't see our families
Mm,
for years because we couldn't leave Jacob.
sure.
And then if we traveled, one of us would go with our daughters. So I don't know what part of our life was not impacted by it, because ultimately, when we woke up, we were like, we need to go and check on Jacob and make sure he breathes. Like it's a very different kind of living when you have a child who depends on you completely to get out of bed, to get dressed, to make sure, do you need oxygen or not?
Mm,
Do you
mm,
know you need your medications at a certain hour? Like it's 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 very gratifying too, because your purpose is crystal clear. Like you have somebody else who relies on you. So some of that small stuff that we all are good at spending time on, we didn't have as much time on for 10 years, which I
yeah.
actually think was one of the biggest gifts that Jacob gave us.
Well, when I met you, I think it was back in 2015,
Oh,
2014,
okay.
2015.
Hmm.
And so this would have been, I guess, just a few years before he passed away, a couple of years before he passed away. And when I met you, I guess it was hard for me to, and other parents within this group at Children's Hospital, because I saw parents who had kids with severe diseases, but you in particular were so energetic, charismatic. You were happy, and then I hear you talk about Jacob, and I think, how can like you're carrying this burden, and as a parent, and you want the best for your child and trying to do everything, but yet it didn't reflect through you. Like you leaned into it and you owned it, and in such a positive way is what I'm saying. And so I guess you talked earlier about falling into a group of special
Yeah.
needs
Yeah.
parents, and a lot of special needs parents that I've met over the last several years, like they have this joy, even though they have this struggle and this pain, and you're late at night, you're up and you're with your child, and it's hard, but when I guess I see a whole different side.
Yeah, yeah. I think, to be honest, and I think I knew that secret with Jacob, that
Okay.
they would be my best years of my life,
Mm,
because I would have both my children, because I knew I would outlive him because of
sure.
his disease. So I think that was like maybe the happiness, sort of, that you know he was in our lives. And oh my God, he was such a source of inspiration. I mean, I've never met somebody
Mm,
who was so strong. I mean, we were told many times he's not going to make it, and then here he was, and he's like, no, I don't care what the doctors say. I still have time to live. So I think that was sort of, there were so many little things, like he could, throughout the whole house, he had a special sound, and it was not really a laugh, but knew he had a good day.
okay,
Like
good.
that, it's hard to describe, but it was just little things, or giving him a bath. He was so happy. Like the little things became truly what got us going.
Yeah.
And after he passed, how do you keep that? Like how do you keep a positivity
Mm, mm-hmm.
when you actually are heartbroken? And I've thought about that, especially now, when we are five and a half years out, and we have a little bit of distance to it. And I think it's also, how do you keep the memory of your child? It's
Sure.
something I think most parents would like to do, and it's not always a specific thing you do. And one thing I have thought about is that Jacob never showed anger or hate
Oh, interesting.
or jealousy. Like, he just didn't have those feelings because of where he also was developmentally. And so sometimes I'm thinking, what about if all of us would think about it and go about their day with a child's eye? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking, like, that is maybe the piece that we as a family could carry forward. Are we always perfect? Far from it,
Right.
but at least if you have that, because that was truly the spirit of Jacob.
Mm.
Very, very happy, even in quite some difficult moments for him. And, and always very, very positive, and not a lot of, this negative feelings that, we can all end up in, especially thinking about the world in the last
Yeah.
couple of years that we have
Yeah.
gone through.
Yeah. That's encouraging to hear, I guess, and thank you for sharing that. He's going through the most difficult trials, and yet there's a happiness about him, and that's really incredible to hear. So I guess, I mean, to my point, you were pouring into this. You're leaning forward, and I mean, you for the most part took yourself out of the workforce. Uh, you're not doing a full time job,
Yes.
and you're taking care of your child. But more than that, you became active within the community, and I want to get to your blog as well,
Mhm.
and kind of how that sets up writing your book,
Yes.
because that's the crux of it. But
Mhm.
you didn't just sit at home and take care of your son. You became active within the community and where we met at Children's
Yes.
Hospital through a parents advisory group there, and I was on that for just a year. There's parents that had been on there for a very long time, but yourself included, you had been on there for multiple years. And that was one outlet. So, can you share a little bit about that and other outlets that you have as
Yeah.
well as you're
You
advocating
know,
for your child?
yeah, and I actually will tell you a story. It
Mm,
was probably 2009, and it was the day before Thanksgiving, when most people will be home cooking and
mm,
preparing for a big meal. We had been in the hospital maybe 60 days. It was a very, very long hospital stay. And we have been told, you need to be prepared that he might not make it. And one of the things that came very clear to me was, oh my God, if I lose Jacob, I'm not ready to lose children's, because we had made so many wonderful friends and relationships with the staff. And that's how I got involved. And I think Family Advisory Council was the first step.
okay.
And so a little bit of a selfish reason there
Mm-hmm.
too, that I didn't want to lose the relationship. But then it was very rewarding, and maybe taking a little bit away feeling sorry for yourself, was to really become an advocate for parents. And so was very involved on the Family Advisory Council, and still today I sit on the Quality and Safety Committee of the board,
Oh
which
wow.
is
Okay.
another, yeah, quite important part for me, because of patient safety. And I
Mm,
saw how easily something could go wrong. And it's not like somebody will go into the hospital and want to make an error today, but things still happen. And how can we make that better? And also now more involved with the grieving program there. So I think it's that sense of, can I help somebody else? Because I think otherwise, you talk about grief, which is the feeling of losing somebody. And as you said in the beginning,
Yeah.
everyone will experience that at some point in life. But the true expression is if you decide to actually mourn who you lost and, basically externalizing your grief. And I am thinking, Aaron, I probably some of that I did as Jacob was living too. I was grieving also as he was living because I knew I was going to lose him. So,
Sure.
you know, I think part of it was also how can I externalize that? And for sure, part of processing my grief when Jacob was living was to blog. There was a way for me to process my feelings
Yeah,
around.
let's dive into that because
Yeah.
I think that's critical.
Yeah, I mean, I did it. I think originally I did it because we had family in Sweden. So if I blogged, they could basically go and read the latest update about Jacob, and I didn't have to email and call all our relatives.
Hmm.
And then it became an outlet. And I also realized that a lot of people were following the blog, even people who had never met Jacob, actually. And they went to look in the morning if
Mm.
there was an update about Jacob, because I think it sometimes even put their life in perspective. Oh, he's fighting in the ICU today. Or so it was a very, very good way for me to express what was going on. And sometimes in the moment, I couldn't really process it, but then maybe late at night, I was then sitting down to write. So it was a very, very good way for me therapeutically to, be a mom of a
Yeah.
very complex, medical fragile child.
Well, and writing in general is a good way to put your thoughts in order. Um, just as a good practice, right? We do this
Mhm.
at work, but
Yes.
uh, but when you're, I guess, when you're dealing with these emotions and trying to figure out what it means and all that, right? I guess it makes sense that writing would be a good way to try to sort through that, and instead of just sitting in bed or sitting on the couch or any other number of things that you could do that are healthy or unhealthy to deal with that. Um, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You talked about, and I've heard you talk about this in other places. You started the blog to help communicate with family members across the world because you because of time and distance, you can't just pick up the phone or share what's going
Yeah.
on, what the latest news is, or maybe there's too many people to share with, right?
Mhm.
And all trying to disseminate that information to multiple people is really hard. Did you also, I guess, recognize at the time, like with the blog, like you're making it public and you did that as a conscious effort, or did you, and you might develop this following? I mean, you really opened up about this,
I did. I
not just to your
did.
family, but to the world.
Yeah, I did. And
Okay.
yeah, that's a little scary at times, of course. But I also think today in social media, there is a lot that is quite superficial. And
Yes.
so I thought if I do this, I should try to do it with my heart. But yeah, sometimes I'm thinking also with the book, because the blog is still, you read an entry and then you go on to the next blog, right? But the book is sort of there, and that of course I wrote later, but it's based on the blog. And now I'm also back in the workforce again, and I work for a large company. And I have colleagues who have read the book,
Hmm.
and sometimes I'm like, yeah, they in a way get to know me through the book.
Sure.
And I need to be okay with that, because they will see a very heartbroken, in a way, mom who lost her child. But then I might sit in a big business meeting, and there might be members who have read the book. But I would say overall that has been very, very positive. And
Yeah.
I have even gotten comments from colleagues that that is an inspiration, and almost like they had no idea about that past, and now I shared that and they learned another side. But yeah, sometimes
Yeah.
it's a little daunting when you think about it. But I, I think it's better to try to, if you're gonna do it, then be real. And
Yes.
I think one thing, when Jacob was that sick in 2009, I think it was that time, I went to the library at Children's and I basically got all the books I could find on grief to prepare myself.
Okay.
And I found a lot of books on the grieving process. And I also found a lot of statistics of divorces when you lose a child.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
found basically zero stories on a parent to parent perspective. And of course, there are books out there, but there were
So
none that I really found. And
so you found most of the books, kind of the how to help books,
how, yes,
right?
yes.
Like, of course, they're and no fault to authors who are trying to help through this. They're doing
No,
it with the best of intentions, and probably want to make a little money too, and that's just fine. But they didn't help, is what you're saying. And
yeah, because I mean, you can read about the stages of
yeah,
grief, and then I didn't need 10 books on that. And as I was, and of course, maybe this was a little bit of an odd way, but I thought I could read a book and prepare myself for grief, which honestly doesn't work. But I wanted to read from another parent's perspective,
mm,
and I did not find a lot of books
were they more
on
the
that.
clinical perspective?
Yes,
I see. Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
So
yeah,
you're approaching it from a different angle, that or
yeah.
filling in that gap that you see is there. Um, okay, that's good. So I guess going back, you're talking about your coworkers, and y- they know this side of you. Then maybe it's a little unfair that you don't know all the inner workings from them,
That's
but they
true.
know. But I guess you're being authentic and you're opening up about that, and I think there's a need for that today. And you're absolutely right with social media. There's so much superficiality on there, and I'm probably uh, guilty of that as well. So I'm not
Me
going to say
too.
that I'm not going to say
Yeah,
that I'm
me
not.
too.
But
Yeah.
I don't share a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff I don't share on social media, but yeah, I guess that vulnerability and that authenticity, people have that sense of connection with you. You may not necessarily have that sense of connection with them, but that's really powerful right there that they have that with you by reading your book. So I think maybe in a way it may not feel like it in the moment, but I guess I wonder, with work, like if that helps, because people see that, like you're not just somebody in a suit across a table or across a screen or whatever. Like you're human.
I think it has
Yeah.
helped. And I have not had a bad reaction. If anything, just the opposite, to be
Yeah.
very honest. And I think that exactly what you're saying, especially also having staff and teams, like I might be in a meeting saying, give directions, and we need to finish this. We have a deadline, but then they know that there is also a personal side, and many have
Yeah.
actually shared their own story with me. So I've also learned a lot more about colleagues that I'm not sure I would have if it
Sure.
weren't for the book. And I recently have a new employee, and she quite quickly shared with me some death in her family. And I don't think she would have done that if she wouldn't have known my story. And I was grateful that she did that because it was two major losses
Mm.
within a year. And I'm sure there will be times where she's very professional, but where, she might need some space. So I do think that you can manage both sides. as long as, yeah, as you say, you're authentic, and again, it's not the topic of every meeting, right? Like,
Right.
you have to create your boundaries
Yeah.
as well, and I think also be a little bit careful. I've never promoted a book like at work, like I wouldn't do
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
but more share with colleagues, and then maybe somebody is telling somebody else. But I think that is also important, maybe slightly separating the two.
That's good. Yeah, and people feel comfortable approaching you and sharing that. I'll tell you, and part of the inspiration for this conversation is there's two people who I know who, in the last 6 months, they lost both their parents, and
Yeah.
within days or a couple of weeks of each other. And I one is I'm not real close with, just time and distance wise. One I work with, and I just I guess I couldn't imagine going through that, and but seeing them share through that has been really powerful, and I appreciate them sharing that. And then going back before we met, this was probably 11 years ago. I had a coworker. We were the same age. We worked around a group of people who were much older and more senior than we were. In an environment we were, even though we were like in our late 20s, early 30s, we were like the kids on the block, compared to the people that we worked around. But he lost his son, I think 6 weeks after he was born, just unexpectedly.
Wow.
And I think that was my first experience with somebody who lost a child. And it was I tried to be there and be a friend and to them, but that was my first experience. I didn't know what to do. But it was, I guess, a bonding moment as well. It, so
Yeah, yeah, 6 weeks is hard. I mean,
yeah,
any time it's hard, I think, when it is your child,
yeah,
but that's probably was very sudden as well.
yeah. And to the point I was making earlier, like you assume that a baby is going to be healthy and pregnancy is going to be great, and it's not necessarily the case. Or even with other loved ones that you expect things are going to work out, and maybe they don't. Um, so there's comfort in that, I guess, knowing we're not the only ones going through
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
okay. So I guess I want to talk a little bit about your experience with children's as well. I appreciate you sharing about that. Uh, I shared a little before this, but I always tell people with Children's Hospital, I think that it's the saddest place on earth, and yet the happiest place on earth. In our experience going there, we did not expect to be there. It was about 10 years ago, with our son shortly after he was born, needing open heart surgery. And it was traumatic for our family. It was the hardest point for me and for my wife to go through. But when we were there, we could see what other families were going through. We weren't the only ones going through. We weren't the only ones in the ICU, with a little infant. Seeing other families, meeting families such as yours through the council. What I learned is, it's a difficult place to be in, but if you're there, you're going to be, wrapped in love and care, and you're going to get great medical attention for your child or for your children. But it's an incredible place, and so I always try to sing the praises of Children's Hospital here in
Yes.
Colorado.
Yeah, it is an amazing place. And as you said, we never wanted to be there. But if you need a hospital, there's no other place that you want to be than children's. And partly it's the medical care, but I think it's truly the caring of the staff that makes a difference. And to today, I mean, we have many, many friends there. And to
Mm,
this day, we also hear how Jacob made a difference in how they care for patients. And one of the things that they have gotten so much better at is, for example, including parents in rounding, and rather than with shift change, they
Mm,
would do the report outside of the room. Now they do it in the room so the parents can contribute. And I think a lot of those things also came out of the Family Advisory Council.
sure.
And not thinking just about your situation, but how can we make it better across the hospital? So, yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. We could have walked away and never put a foot in there again after we walked out because he passed away at Children's. And it took me quite a while before I could go back into the ICU. It took me a few years, actually.
I see.
But I definitely, love going there. It's crazy, but I feel such a strong connection still. And during COVID,
Mm,
the meetings are on Zoom,
hmm.
but have started to give blood, just to be
Okay,
able to go there. So very, very special place.
it is. So, um, with your book, and you're transitioning a little bit to that.
Yes.
You wrote that, I guess, as a way to manage your emotions, your grief, your pain, and process that, I guess. Um, and you built this off of, I guess, is that right? And,
Yes.
you built this off the blog that you had started.
Yeah, so in a way, I call it my COVID project
Okay.
because I wanted to write a book about Jacob. I had that thought for, I don't remember if it was after he passed or even when he
Mm,
lived, but I had that thought of, one day I want to write a book about this kid. And the working name was always Book of Jacob. Like I had that for a long time. And then I met with the editor and I said, I want to take this blog of 10 years and turn it into a book.
mm.
And he's like, oh, your blog is all over the place. So you have to sort of decide what to do. And she helped me to say, why don't you focus on the year after he passed? Because
Mm,
I had sort of shifted to writing to him when he wasn't here anymore. And honestly, that wasn't planned. It was just like the void of him and returning to the blog. And I couldn't write anymore about Jacob's day. So instead, I wrote about my day to
to
him.
Jacob, yeah.
And and so the blog is definitely the base of the book. To be honest, the blog posts were written back in 2016, of course, with some editing and then combining some blog posts because there were also some repetition. But yeah, that's basically what was the base of it, and then heavy editing from me and my editor. And I did that during COVID when I couldn't go and see friends on weekend. I usually
Sure.
spend my Sunday afternoons having a cup of coffee and editing. And I don't know if I would have gotten it done if I didn't just decide I'm going to do it now. And, this is a time, this was the winter before I released the book. And I was like, now I'm just going to go for it because we are all stuck in our houses and I'm
Right.
going to do it. So,
So the seed
yeah.
was planted several years ago,
Yes,
and you were
yes,
finally able to
yes.
come and germinate it and tend
Mhm.
to it.
And I was
Yeah,
grieving again when I
sure.
actually edited it because I all the memories came back. So I'm kind of happy that I waited to do it because, like you and I can talk about it today, I don't know if I would have been able to do that as well, 1 or 2 years after he passed. Like there is something that also helps you with time, at least when
Yeah.
it comes to talking about it. So I think, yeah, maybe there was something in the time that had to elapse as well from his actual death.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there's a process there, and you can do a little more as time passes. That seems to make sense. Um, what what's the response been as you've written this and gone around and talked to other people about it? I know you've done other podcasts. You probably haven't been able to do many, any speaking events in person, but what have people said about it as you've shared your story in your writing?
Yeah. So I was actually very happily surprised because I felt I wrote the book more for myself and
Mm.
thinking about the close circle of friends, and it got a lot of response when it came out. And little things that maybe don't matter in the long run, but it was the number one bestseller on Amazon. And it was
Wow.
both in several categories and new release, which that wasn't why I wrote the book.
That's not what you
Like,
set out to do. Yeah.
no. So it was kind of fun that that happened. And a lot of people reached out and, even said that it helped them in their grief, maybe for a loved one and maybe not always a child. And this was really an advice from my editor to write the tips at the end of each chapter.
Mm.
And it's like, from my perspective, some tips of coping with grief. So that apparently was very, very helpful. And then I've also heard it's a very hard book to read because it's quite emotional and raw. So people are like, I cried through the book, or I had to take it in pieces. And but I would say
Yeah.
overall very, very positive. And it was also on a book tour in the fall where different book review sites gave independent reviews, which
Okay.
is also a little scary. You
Right.
put yourself
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, that's a vulnerable
And
moment.
yeah, and the reviewers had not lost a child, but
Mm.
it was overwhelmingly positive. And and then what I did not expect is, as you said, podcasts. So
Yeah.
I've done 3 podcasts in the last 4 months. So, that's just kind of a fun way to have the book continue living with me and the community. And again, as you said, with COVID, speaking arrangements is
Yeah.
not maybe really happening. But if everything goes well, I should have a conference in June for the National Mitochondrial Conference. And
Okay.
so they are planning on doing a conference in person. Let's see where the world is. But and then children's, they're going to do a conference for grieving parents, and they would
Mm.
like to have me speak. Here, they do not want to do it on Zoom. They really would like to rather wait until it is safe to meet in person because of the topics.
Yeah.
So I don't know when that will happen, but that also got me very connected with the grieving program and the head
Okay.
of that program at Children's. So sometimes I think it's also sort of a journey. Like, I hadn't really planned on that, but that's also what happened with the book. And so I'm grateful because it's hopefully helping somebody else on this journey. And if that is the case, that's actually all that I was asking for,
Well,
and
undoubtedly, people are benefiting from this. So, yes. So you mentioned earlier tips, and so I want to build on that. So it sounds like you wrote tips at the end of every chapter. Okay,
yeah, I
and
did.
so that's useful. So it's not just the narrative, but there's something applicable,
The ways,
at the
yeah.
end of chapter. So I was talking to a friend yesterday and sharing that we were going to have this conversation, and another mom here that I know, and her question, which I want to ask of you, was essentially like, "What's your call to action?" And that's a pointed way of
Yes.
saying it, but
Hmm.
what is your
Hmm.
advice for other
Yeah.
people? It could be parents or
Yep.
other people who are
Hmm.
going through that loss, the grieving process.
Hmm.
What is your, I guess, top advice for them.
Mhm.
You discovered through your book.
So I would say from two perspectives. So if you are grieving, and you might have lost someone, I think one of the things that is most important if you are part of a family, which we all are in one way or another, realize that everybody will grieve on their own terms. I think that can destroy a family a lot if you expect the rest of your family to grieve the way you are. And that's something that I was very intentional about because my husband would not be doing a podcast and my daughter wouldn't either. And letting them grieve on their terms and when the time is right, I think is very, very important to keep your most loved ones who are with you in the grief. And then if you are support of somebody who have lost, I think we are very afraid to talk about grief, and talking to a parent who have lost their child, like that's like the worst. And you don't need to have the perfect words,
Mm.
just listen. And because we really want to talk about our kids, like we think about them all the time, so just listen. And if you knew the child or the person, just share a specific story or memory that is important to you. I mean, that's one of the things that warm my heart the most when somebody texts me, Jacob just he had his birthday on Monday, and we had several friends who shared a memory
Oh,
of Jacob that
just
was
this
important
past
to
Monday.
them. Yeah, but yeah, on
Wow.
Monday
Okay.
he would have been 16.
Wow.
So, so he had a big day, and so I think that is such a simple thing you can do. You don't need to do something major. Just share a memory because you will think about that person every
Mm.
day, and it really makes a difference.
Thank you for that input and that advice. That's really helpful. And I think that's good. And I think that's something that I struggle with when I see others who've lost somebody. I don't know what to say.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's good advice, even for just to be there to share a memory or just be there to listen to them.
yeah.
Okay. So we'll wrap up here, but I'm wondering if you could share one of your favorite memories of Jacob. Speaking of sharing, and let's hit this on a high note here because it sounds like he is a wonderful little boy. He had his own personality, and at Kaleidop Room, he really made an impact on many people. It sounds like at Children's Hospital, and people through your family and your friends network. But is there something that you love to
Yeah,
share
there
about
are
Jacob?
many. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure.
there are many. When I think about him, but I think one was his last Thanksgiving,
Mm.
which we didn't know at the time, and we were celebrating it with friends, and we were sitting around the table, and we were giving thanks. And when we came to Jacob, we said, Jacob, do you want to give thanks? And you could see, because he was hooked up to his speech device, that he was really looking for the right thing to say. So
Yeah.
we were all silently waiting to see would he say something or not. And he was waiting for the right thing, and then suddenly he said, I love you. And I think that was, oh my God, like, yeah, it's hard to get through a Thanksgiving without
Mm.
thinking about what would he be thankful for. And those were the three words he said. And so, yeah, that is a very
That's
special
awesome.
moment.
Yep. And you'll
Yeah.
have that for every Thanksgiving moving forward.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That is powerful. Thank you. Uh,
Yeah.
anything else you want to share before we go? obviously.
No, I mean, I think thank you for doing this. Grief is a topic that we often try to avoid, and
Mm.
I think it's part of our lives. And the more we can talk about it, the more natural it becomes. We all will experience death, and with that comes grief. So if we are comfortable to talk about it, it will help somebody else. So thank you for doing this, to be honest.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate you opening up. I mean, I think you're a leader. When I met you back in was 2014, 2015,
Yeah.
I saw you're a leader then, and you've continued to do so in sharing your story. And now, after Jacob has passed and sharing the story and what you've gone through in life and in his death. And I appreciate what you've been doing, and to be able to use this platform to help give you a voice and share with other people, because I think there's a lot of people that I know that could benefit from this, and maybe there's people that are out there that are going to watch this. I have no idea who they are, but they stumble across this on YouTube. I hope that for them that it's a benefit, and maybe they get your book if it's something that's of interest to them, and learn more, dive in, learn more, and get your unique perspective. You're saying, because there's a lot of books out there that are more from the clinical white coat side of
Yeah.
things, rather
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
the parent side or the relatives side. So I appreciate that. So okay, let me share this. So here's your book, Letters to Jacob, and the subtitle is Grieving the Loss of a Child. That's simple. Letters to
Yeah.
Jacob, Grieving the Loss of a Child. You can find it on Amazon. Anywhere else?
I think that's it,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, everybody has
Mhm.
Amazon, so get on Amazon. Here's Maria's profile page here. And you can learn a little bit more about her, about her son Jacob. A really great video, short video here of them. But check that out. And then also, one moment, you could also go over to the blog momentswithjacob.blogspot.com to learn more about Maria and Jacob and their family. Momentswithjacob.blogspot.com is that address. So, Maria, thank you so much for taking time to share today.
Of
Thank you for
course.
opening up
Of course.
your life in general and
Yep.
sharing with the
Of
world.
course.
You have a powerful story, and I've been
Thank
inspired by it, and I
you.
want others to as well.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thank you so much. I'll gonna
Thank you.
move over here and have you drop off, but wrap up, and we'll connect later offline. So
Great. Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you so much. Okay, folks, there you have it. Maria Hopfgarten, author of Letters to Jacob, Grieving the Loss of a Child. Just a powerful example, an inspirational example of a family who just poured their love into a child with a rare disease, and knowing that her child is not going to live for live long, and then in recent years coping through that grieving process, but doing so in a way where Maria is being an example for us to look at, and it's just an incredible story, incredible family, and I'm appreciative of the work that Maria is doing, and she's going to continue to do this through Children's Hospital, as she said. So I wish her luck through that, and wish her luck through getting the word out about her book and her story, Jacob's story. What a interesting story. Sounds like a very energetic, precocious boy as he could be, and just really influence people's lives. Just very much an inspiration. So, like I said at the beginning of this, so far I've talked a lot about talking with people and talking with groups that are on the ground, as I say, they're rolling up their sleeves, doing the hard work of helping others in Colorado, and trying to tell that positive story. There's the flip side of that story as well. The people that they're helping are struggling. Maybe it's grief, maybe it's pain, or it's another hardship that they're going through. But I think you can't have one without the other. And there's just so many inspirational stories that I've been hearing, and that I hope to be able to share through this channel. And I hope that you'll join me through this. Quickly, you can find out more. Go to my channel, milehighlive.co, not com, co as in Colorado, because that's where we live. And so that'll make it easy. But yeah, you can see some past videos there, sign up for my newsletter as well. But I hope that you'll continue to join as I have some other interesting interviews coming up here in the near future, some here in February with some great guests and some that I've had in the past, talking with around Colorado Gives Day and some great organizations that are helping families, including organizations like A Precious Child, who now they're helping families who have been impacted by the Marshall Fire in the Boulder area. I talked to them a few weeks before that happened, talking about another difficult topic, but suicide prevention and suicide education with Douglas County Coroner, which was a powerful discussion, getting her perspective on that, and talking with great woman out of Aurora who's been helping immigrants in that community. So those are the type of discussions that I've been trying to have through this, and I hope that you'll continue to join with that. I'm not looking for people to subscribe just because they, just because I want subscriber numbers. I would love it if you subscribed, as I continue to try to build a community and a group here that's interested in learning about the positive stories of what's going on in Colorado. As I say, I'm spotlighting people who are elevating Colorado. They're doing the hard work of rolling up their sleeves and helping people in their community. That's what this is about. And Maria is a great example of that. Somebody who's elevating Colorado through her work, and she's a wonderful example of a mom pouring love into her child, but beyond that, being a leader in the community, being an example for others, getting involved where she can, where she sees she fits best, and we're all the better for that here in our state. So with that, I will get going. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you join me here in the next stream, and if you check out my site, milehigh.co as well, that would be awesome. I'm Aaron Johnson, coming to you from Castle Rock. That's what's good in Colorado.